Hey everyone, and the question we're here today to ask is what should corporate do in order to innovate better? Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live. I'm glad that you are here with me. I'm Mazor, Kario, an innovation and value creation expert, and I'll be your host. And today with me, I have a very special guest, Hugo Raaijmakers. Yeah, it was okay. I hope the
Yeah, it
name.
was okay. It was pretty okay.
Head of Digital Platform Strategy and Innovation in PA Consulting. Great to see you.
Thank you very much.
And I'm so happy that you joined me here today because you have so much experience and so many stories to tell us about corporate innovation. And I'm sure we're gonna have fun and enjoy to talk about this subject. And I'm gonna ask you in the beginning about this current time. We're in the middle of the COVID crisis. And what are the challenges that innovation leaders face these days?
Well, it's what innovation leaders face. So first of all, what businesses face is that consumer behavior is changing dramatically, which of course leads in some industries to substantial problems like travel, for instance, or hospitality. Those industries are suffering like crazy. But of course, for other companies, it has been very good. If you look at Netflix or Zoom or any of the companies that act a lot in digital, they see a lot of uptake. So essentially, what I see is two different reactions, right? The first reaction of corporates to COVID in industries that are sort of under pressure is that there is cost reduction exercises. Innovation tends to be sort of marginalized to a certain extent, purely because the reason that those companies do this many times is that they're faced with a lot of constraint on their bottom line, top line incomes. And they need to find a way to cut costs. And cutting costs in innovation doesn't hurt immediately, right? Because mostly it's not core business. Right. So that's a thing that we see. I'm not saying it's a good thing, because if you start minimalizing and cost cutting innovation departments, you also damage your growth potential. And so those innovation capabilities are built up over time in a very sort of difficult environment. Killing them or diminishing them is meaning that you lose years of sort of creating a new mindset and a new sort of culture. So it's definitely not preferable. Of course, it's completely understandable. But then also, there's actually a lot of companies that actually see this as an opportunity to start growing into new spaces, into existing spaces, and use innovation as an enormous leverage to help them with that, right?
Right.
And of course, by no surprise, big tech is doing this. Is doing this very successfully, trying out loads of new propositions in the market, testing it. I work for a food retail company. Their digital sort of element has been going through the roof because everybody is delivering. Let their food be delivered. So online sales of food retailers is a very good pocket. So there's also a lot of growth potential, and these kinds of companies is looking at ways how to sort of build out their sort of imperiums. So there are essentially two reactions, and so a lot of new attention for finding new growth, or it's diminishing the.
Yeah. I think that research found that in past crises, the companies that started to innovate earlier, even during the crisis, got more growth afterwards. And it really makes sense because they used what they currently have, and it really makes sense. But what would be the difference between a company that decides to go back to their core values and more core services and products, and the companies that would like to explore more and test these like new borders?
Yeah, well, of course, it's dependent on the kind of industry that you are in, right? So if you are in an industry that has a lot of growth potential from the core anyways, because they get more attraction, then it's of course easier to do this. But essentially, I think it comes down to mindset of leadership, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
just to give you an example, if you look at Amazon, they do like 4,000 or 5,000 experiments a day. They have experimentation in their DNA. That is a different mindset than a more traditional enterprise, um, which doesn't necessarily have this really agile, innovative mindset yet, right? So for big tech, and for companies that have already embraced that mindset, is much difficult. And there are industry leaders that see that see this path of COVID as a real opportunity, even though they might have issues in their revenues, and pull it through and get still the attention. That's also what I see a lot. But it's very much tied up to leadership, attitude, mindset, and
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I'm writing a book called Harness the Wind of Change, so it's really related to that topic. So, what would be, as you see it, the most powerful way to overcome this kind of a crisis?
Yeah, well, it to a certain extent is it's sort of reinventing yourself. I think what we've seen now from COVID, maybe half a year ago or a couple of months ago, you were thinking like, "Hey, this is going away," but isn't going away, right? You see that this is a permanent sort of change of mindset and behaviors of people. The situation itself, I personally see not changing a lot. I saw a fact in the paper this morning about Dutch people that almost 80% are not enticed to use the vaccine when it comes out, right? So there is no end to this situation for the coming years to come. So you need to reinvent yourself to a certain extent.
Right.
And that reinvention, that desires having new perspectives on your company and where you should grow and how you can support your customers and your suppliers and your partners in this between brackets new world. But because
Yeah,
it is a new world,
it is.
unfortunately, it's gonna
Yeah.
stay here for a long time. That's my
Yeah.
conviction.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not like most people hoped it will be like yeah, something minor and we'll go back to normal, but
Yeah,
there is no normal anymore. It's there is no
no,
more. And
no, no.
I think that when companies understand that it's like a new thing, a new normal thing that you need to relate to, I think that all the companies, it doesn't matter where they started, they need to go and see themselves as digital in a sense. If they want to go into that direction, maybe it will be very hard for them to stay relevant. Maybe not all of them, but most of them need to think about this aspect of life because we're going more into that direction, I guess.
Yeah,
And
and I think that's a good point. So, what COVID taught business so far is that the world is digital. And of course, we knew already that it's digital, but there's all the digital transformation being done at corporates over the last 10 years have been very unsuccessful, very sluggish, very ineffective for all sorts of reasons. But now you see with all the lockdowns and people cannot go to their companies, it's imperative to have your stuff digital, right? Digital sales, digital e-commerce, digital engagement, and it puts a humongous pressure on corporations and on corporate innovation to cater for that, right? So becoming really digital in a 10 times faster point of view is super important. And then of course, if everybody goes digital, what is the differentiation, right? So where you can have a lot of differentiation with your stores, differentiation online is a completely different ball game. So what are the new business models, platform business models that you need to consider to win in digital?
right.
Where before you were not so digital, Now it's an unescapable truth that you need to be there, and you need to win, right? You cannot
Yeah.
lose. Uh,
Yeah. And
so
it's a hard competition there because it's so saturated sometimes, and you need to know how to use your brand in a different way within a different context, and what you're doing that. And it's not only for your clients or for your suppliers; it's for yourself as a company working online, being engaged, and doing all the general processes that you've done till now and do it differently. So it's different in both aspects of what you're doing, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
that's right.
and and what would be like the characteristics that you see for a change maker, for innovation leader? What will make him successful, other than the mindset that you talked right now?
Um, well, it's in corporations. An innovation leader needs to have. I think if we're not talking about mindset, we need to have excellent stakeholder skills, right? The funny thing is that I worked for 20 years at corporates, at Philips, at ING, and at Vodafone. You learn your corporate MBA, right? How can you make things happen in a very large, sometimes very political, complex organization, right? And I think for innovation leaders that bring something new to the table, which demands change, and these kinds of people, they need to be convincing. They need to play the chessboard really well. So I think that other than all other things, I think that this needs to be a trait, a characteristic attribute of a person in that position. A bridge builder, but also a disruptor with the right sort of diploma, corporate MBA diploma at hand.
Yeah.
Because making impact from an innovation point of view for large corporates is super difficult, right? You can have
Right.
the best, you can have the best ideas, but then still fail because you didn't walk the right path in the organization. So
Yeah.
that I think is very important. And then other than that, but that goes for every leader, but especially for innovation, you need to be inspiring, right? You're talking to a lot of innovation initiative leads, CEO, entrepreneurs. You have to build that engagement and that inspiration around the topic and around what needs to be achieved.
Yeah.
Once again, that counts for every leader, but I think for innovation is extra important because there you desire a sort of different behavior, much more entrepreneurial, much more innovative. People take a lot more risk, and you need to consistently. You need to build that trust with the people and that inspiration going forward.
Yeah, so it's like two parts. One is like the capability to be charismatic and know how to tell stories and to inspire, and the other thing is to understand the structure of the corporate and how to what's the game to play within it. And it's like I think like two very different things. One is more like a disruption thing that you need to be some kind of a change maker from within, and on the other side you need to know all the small barriers that you might take into consideration in order to do it. And it is complex. I think that had it not been complex, we would have seen like companies stay and never die because they all innovate and go on and go on, and then and we know that companies that were in the average was 60 years in the past, now it's like 10 to I think 12 years average lifespan of a company. And it's due to that. It's really hard to innovate. It's really hard. So what would be the best tips or practices you will give like change maker and innovation leaders, to do it right?
Well, so what I did myself when I worked at ING is when I started with that assignment, and that assignment was a transformation of innovation and get that into the company. And that might be a very sort of pragmatic tip. So it's all about change management, right?
Right.
Transforming a company is about change management, but change management is an ancient, how do you call it, a capability, right? Skill. And I was sort of projecting 3 years ahead all of my milestones, and then I was thinking like, okay, this is just bullshit, of course, right? Because I don't know what's going to happen in a year from now, it's not lean startup, right? So what I did, I read a book. It's called Lean Change Management. And it essentially says there are a number of hypotheses regarding change in your company, and you build MVPs around those hypotheses, and gradually you go through to the change process. And that's what we did. We adopted that whole thinking. Meaning, for instance, we had a portfolio of a couple of trainings. We did that training was connected to a hypothesis, and that training itself was an MVP. And we did like 10 of those trainings to make it really work well. And then we started to scale it up in the company with thousands of people. And that's what we did with everything, at the portfolio process, the strategy. So all of those elements of a corporation that need to be changed, we did in this kind of MVP lean change management way. It's a very pragmatic tip, but it worked really nicely because you remain very agile and it is very engaging. And so I don't need like 3 months to think about a new organization. I can do it in 3 days because then we already have the MVP and we can start testing it. And then over the coming weeks, we have something which is as good or even better than sitting in a room for 3 months thinking out the whole organization. So this kind of mindset is actually lean startup for the corporate, not for projects, but for the corporate itself.
Yeah.
And that helps. And it helps. It gives you a lot of speed, and it gives you a lot of commitment because people are joining all of these projects around a new process or whatever.
So it's a very practical solution there. And this is what when I go and do workshops, I always like to be very practical because people want results. They like vision is something that you need to do and you need to find, but it's very hard to grasp, and people find it hard to relate to and to be engaged with it. And when you have something tangible, like this is the MVP, we tried it, it worked, it didn't work, and we have another option and another option. And then you can really find your way from the results. And while you're doing that, I guess that people are more engaged because they're part of what you're doing, and not only you telling them this is what we could do, or it's very practical. So tell us like a use case of a client that you remember that had hard times or need to manage something, and how did you help them?
Well, maybe coming back to that, so I think that another super important thing which I see going wrong a lot of times is that you have corporate innovation. Corporate leaders try to change the company. They have portfolios of projects. But essentially, innovation is not a silo, right? It is there to support the organization, as IT is there to support the organization. And many times it's just two silos in the corporate, right? Having its own life. I think integrating it as much as possible and creating that shared budget, that shared overview with the rest of the business is a real success factor of corporate innovation. But it desires a lot of alignment and relationship building and commitment to each other. But essentially is one of the only ways to essentially make it happen over time. Silo won't last very long. One day, your CEO or the board will wake up and will ask, okay, what is the return on investment? And that can be a difficult question to answer if you're too siloed in your organization, and will cause problems.
Yeah, I think that in general, as I see it, like companies which are younger, they are much more flat and they are doing things like in a net and creating things together faster. But when you have something which is more hierarchical, it's harder. And once you are breaking these silos and sub departments, and then it's easier for you to do things together. And working together, you mentioned it a few times, like doing things together, breaking the silos, getting people involved in what you're doing, not being separate as an innovation department or section is very important in order to get people involved and to get all them brain power that you could get from the company, because there are so many smart people in the company, and some of them are not really, you don't hear them, and they are not contributing what they could do in order to help you do it. And if you could make them like part of what you're doing, it's easier for you to really create a change, right? It's not like the small things, it's really the people that want to look to the future and do something for the company in the maybe a few years, year or two from now. We're not talking 10 years, but like what could be, and not only what we can do right now. Which is a bit like, it's hard for people because they're so used to what they're doing right now, right? They're used to the way they're making money right now and the way they're working right now. And I guess that COVID in that sense made them think differently, because they cannot do it as they're used to. And what was the most surprising thing that you learned about innovation during these years?
Most surprising thing. Well, there's a lot of things are surprising, actually.
Okay.
Most surprising thing. Yeah, no, I think it's so innovation is a way to get new perspectives on the disruption that has been going on for so many years, now being put on steroids by COVID. I think it's a wonderful sort of way to create new horizons for your company. But on the other hand, yeah, it needs the right how do you call it? It needs the right design to be effective and to survive the corporate, right? And that is, yeah, it's surprising that still there is still a lot of fighting and a lot of sort of misalignment between corporate innovation and the rest of the organization. I think it hasn't reached that maturity level that innovation is seen as a critical and essential element of the survival of the company, as IT is, or marketing. So that is for me still surprising, but yeah, it's I think it's getting there. It's getting more mature, but it takes a long time, and many companies don't have that time anymore, especially now with COVID. That time is shortened, I think, and yeah, then you, without innovation in the right growth perspective and opportunities and partnerships in the ecosystem, you will have a hard time in your valuation as a company, right? How do shareholders and parties value you as a forward-looking company, but also very much in the sales potential and engagement with users.
Yeah, I think that for me, when I think about innovation, it's like life is change, but people don't like to be changed. So it's like I saw a cartoon a few days ago, and then there was like a crowd, and somebody asked who wants innovation, and then everybody said, yeah, we want innovation. Who wants to innovate? It was like less people, and then he asked who wants to fail, and everybody was gone. And once you're doing something new, sometimes you're failing. And I think that people are trying to avoid the unknown if they can. Now it's hard for them, but if they can, they're trying to avoid the unknown. And especially when companies were very successful until now, they still believe that their processes and the way they did things till now and what they were used to it's really hard to say goodbye to what they're used to. So it's like asking them to be different, to be a different person in a sense, right? So it's really hard. And what would be your number one tip for innovation leaders? If like they would say, okay, we have like a very short time, the company is not in a good state, and we need only one, like maybe one person, one solution, one process, one thought that would make us different in a sense.
Sorry, one tip you mean?
Yeah, one specific tip that you would give them, like do only one thing that is like
Yeah.
that could change the way that you're doing it right now?
Yeah, one tip would be is that you should never never lose sight of the people perspective. I think that essentially people are the carriers of the innovation mindset, entrepreneurial mindset, and that needs to be nurtured in the right way. Especially you say change is difficult. Change is difficult, but what I learned is to show people the opportunity of using innovation for themselves, for their own personal CV, but also to fast track their results and success in the corporate. So it's learning them to have this kind of growth mindset. And I think that is one of the most essential tips, is to spend enough time on have the right people, have the right CEO leaders of your initiatives. Think about how to best convert people in the businesses where they have a lot of constraint and pressure of the day-to-day business. Also think about the people perspective, because if you solve that in the right way, it will be an enormous boost for innovation in general. So that would be my tip. I think there's way too less attention being spent on the whole people perspective in innovation.
Yeah. So when you're saying people, it's your employees and the people who are the leaders and the CEOs
Yeah,
who create the company, but it's more than that. It could be your suppliers, it could be your clients, your users.
sure. Yeah,
So it's all the same perspective that is less into the business or the technology and technology company or the product. It's the perspective of what you could get from the soft skills of the people and the way they think.
yeah,
And I think it's especially important right now when you see people who are used to growth mindset and growing with change and learning and making things better all the time. They are used to getting into a messy situation, unknown situation, and they believe they could do it. They have a
yeah.
way of doing things differently. And if you're not used to that and you're getting into this very big unknown, I guess it's harder. It's harder for people in general, and employees are people, so it's all the same, I guess. And tell
Yeah,
me,
it's a little bit of a no-brainer, but I think it's still a very important element. I many times see corporates with a lot of innovation projects, and then the people in those innovation projects, mostly maybe disruptive projects, they're not entrepreneurial at all, right? So it's not picking out the right people. How do you incentivize a CEO to take it to the next level, right? That's kind of really thorough thinking on the people aspect. If it's not there, you will have very mediocre results going forward, right? So
yeah,
it plays on many levels, this people aspect. But yeah, and then also for leaders, so leaders not having not having the right mindset to judge projects going through the funnel, for instance, right? Thinking a lot about financial accounting, but not innovation accounting, right? Thinking in business cases, not in hypothesis, right?
right,
It's all people, right? It's everything has to do with people and mindset. And
yeah.
if that's not landed right, and you have not given it a lot of attention, then you will fail on most of the parts, even though you have the fantastic technology and you have fantastic partners, then still it will be difficult, right?
Yeah, I think that when I come from Israel, and Israel is like lots of startups, and they always have an idea. Like if you want to think about, everybody has something to say, and they always have a better idea than you have.
Mhm.
And it's something that I think makes Israel really think differently, because we're always trying, and we're used to messy, unknown situation, and that's when I yeah, when I meet people from more quiet countries, it's harder for them to really understand what is the meaning of changing all the time. And I talked to a friend from Sweden, and he told me that in Sweden they want to have more entrepreneurs and more startups. And he said that one of the things that the government is doing is paying startups. And since they are like employees, or it's a different mindset than being an entrepreneur in a startup. You're always eager and even hungry to learn and to do more, right? And it's hard to incentivize when you're within a company and you have other projects, and maybe it's harder for you to think that you might fail, and what is the price of being failing, and what does that mean within companies. It's really hard. And it comes from the way you see innovation. As you said, if you're just looking at the bottom line all the time, like did it make us money or not? Is it like what's the ROI all the time? You don't see the process of learning and getting better. And maybe this time this project is not the best project, but maybe the next one you'll get there. And if you're doing some of them in parallel, one of them could be very, very successful for your future. But
this is also a point. This is also a point where there's a lot of problems in corporate innovation. Is the fact that more and more money goes into corporate innovation, more and more expectations. But as corporate innovation is not so mature, very difficult to have the right metrics, but to have the right return on an investment and return on innovation being measured in the right way. So yes, there is a lot of expectation, a lot of engagement, but it always comes to a point where senior leaders don't see the returns or haven't been managed on it to see different things of progress, and then it goes wrong. So it is this very unfortunate fact of innovation, corporate innovation not being measurable enough, that it fails in the corporate as such, because of course businesses are run on revenues and profits, and innovation is just adding to that. And if it's not clear how it adds to that after a couple of years, it will be killed itself, right? Or it will be diminished. So there's still a lot of work to be done in this area, right? So how can you sort of professionalize corporate innovation to a standard which is sustainable over many years of time, and for everybody very clear how it contributes to the overall business, right? That point we have not reached for a lot of corporates, I think.
Yeah, and it's hard to measure, right? It's hard to measure a return on innovation. What would be like the best measurement that we have right now, as you see it?
Well, I think that the point is that projects, innovation projects, especially disruptive projects, they actually need a lot of more time to mature, right? And they go from early stage startup to becoming a startup to becoming a scale-up. And at a given moment in time, this starts to give the right returns. And so Google also took a lot of years for their platform to be connected to AdWords and to generate a lot of budget. And now it's almost a $2 trillion company. So was Google not measured on anything? Of course, they were measured on recurring users and the user base. Was that giving any dime? No, didn't give any revenue. But of course, smart venture capitalists, they know that this translates easily into money if there is a business model attached to it, right? So, and having that patience in corporates and having the right metrics like recurring users or whatever metric in more sort of the innovation part, and teaching people what success can look like, and having the patience, that resonates, that can bring you the right projects. But if you after 3 months already start asking the revenue of an initiative that is just gone live, that can be quite disappointing, of course.
Yeah, especially when you have like 100% of what your revenues are, it's what you're currently doing. And it will take a very long time until these few projects will get even near to the 100% that you currently have, because they are so young. You cannot really compare in any sense what you have at the company. And that's why it's hard to tell like leaders it's important, because they say, okay, like 7% of our revenues come from there. So but can you compare something which is 3 years old to something which is 50 years old? Like it's hard to compare, right? But it's hard to be patient too. So I really understand the stakeholders.
Yeah, but you have to have the right expectations. You have to have the business strategy and all of its KPIs well connected to innovation. Show how that works, educate people, and have incubator that grows these kinds of initiatives well measured in the right direction with the right supportive leadership. That is the ideal situation, and that also takes time, right? It's transforming mindsets and teaching people what success can look like and have the patience for it.
Yeah. And it's not only the time that it takes for an initiative to be a successful startup or a story, it's the time that you take for your company to learn how to innovate. It's not like, now we know and then we do it. It's like you're learning as you go for what it means for your company, not in general, what is the process that could be. You need to learn about yourself. How can you do it? And teach people and leaders how to do it better, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I learned so much, and you're very, very smart and insightful. So thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
And if somebody wants to ask you something, what would be the best place to connect with you?
No, they can use my email, I think.
Okay, I'll add it. No problem.
Then sure.
Yeah. And we're now live on LinkedIn. So if somebody it's the first time we're live on LinkedIn, so it's really good. Right. So thank you everyone who joined us, and thank you, Hugo, for your time. It's been very insightful.
You're welcome.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.